Good morning. The NAACP Forward Together Moral Movement is a state-based, deeply state government-focused, deeply moral, deeply constitutional, anti-racism, anti-poverty fusion movement here in North Carolina and in other places throughout the nation. We are not a partisan movement. We are a fusion movement of the people. We stand for the following agenda. One, pro-labor, anti-poverty policies that ensure economic sustainability by the following steps: fighting for full employment, living wages, the alleviation of disparate unemployment, a green economy, labor rights, affordable housing, targeted empowerment zones and community banks, strong safety net services for the poor, fair policies for immigrants, infrastructure development, and fair tax reform. Number two, we stand for educational equality by ensuring every child receives a high-quality, well-funded, constitutional, diverse public education, as well as access to community colleges and universities by securing equitable funding for minority colleges and universities as well. Number three, we stand for health care for all by assuring access to the Affordable Care Act, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and fighting for and providing environmental protection and environmental justice, especially for poor and minority communities. Number four, we stand for fairness in the criminal justice system by addressing the continuing inequalities in the system and providing equal protection under the law for black, brown, and poor white people. And number five, we stand for the protection and expansion of voting rights, women's rights, LGBT rights, immigrants' rights, and the fundamental principle of equal protection under the law. For us, these issues are not liberal or conservative. They are rooted in our deepest and most fundamental constitutional values that require equal protection under the law, that say that you're supposed to govern for the good of the whole, that say that the goal of government is life, liberty, the enjoyment of the fruit of your own labor, and the pursuit of happiness, which is in our state constitution, that say, for instance, in Article 10, that the first duty of a civilized and Christian state, this is in our Constitution, is beneficent care for the poor, the unfortunate, and the orphan. These for us are not mere partisan issues, Democrat or Republican, but we believe they represent issues that impact the very soul and structure of our state. We are not bound by any political party. We can work with anyone who is serious about moving our state forward and not backwards. The reality is you're either for voting rights or you're not. You're either for equal rights or you're not. Right. You're either for lifting up the poor or you're not. It's not this two-step game that often is played in politics. There are some things that are deeply rooted in our Constitution and deeply rooted in our deepest religious values. The scriptures clearly tell us, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights. And in the New Testament, it clearly says that governments will be judged by how we treat the least of these. The diverse coalition that makes up the Forward Together Moral Monday movement came out in record numbers on Tuesdays to express one sentiment in particular. We will never go back. We will never retreat. The turnout was a record for a midterm election and was made up of African Americans, whites, Latinos, people of all different classes, faith, sexualities, and ages. And we believe these people who are people who not only voted, but who will stay vigilant and will grow their ranks in the fight for a fair and just state. It should be noted as we do the analysis that North Carolina was the only state in the country where you had a change in incumbency. For instance, where Democrats picked up seats in the state legislature, both in the House and the Senate, the only state caucus in the country. We should note what happened in Asheville, in Buncombe County, in the West, that is normally considered somewhat conservative, where two of the leading members of the extremist ranks of the current Republican Party actually lost in that. And we should also note that North Carolinians voted for a more diverse Supreme Court in the face of the critical issues that will be coming before their court. We are deeply encouraged by this large movement of diverse friends who joined in protest, in a kind of protest vote against the suppressionist tactics aimed primarily at people of color. But people of all different races see this as a very threat to our democracy. Many people stood in line for hours or were directed from precinct to precinct but refused to be denied their right to vote. We thank all of those who are working day and night to build the new fusion movement of voters. We do not know yet how many people were discouraged from voting by the elimination of Sunday voting, same-day registration, and out-of-precinct voting, but we will analyze the results in the days to come. In fact, our lawyers and team are working on that right now. We already know, however, and this is important, we believe, for the media, that according to the Brennan Center report, that in the North Carolina Senate race, State House Speaker Tom Tillis beat Kay Hagan by a margin of 1.7%, or about 48,000 votes. This was done at the same time, according to their report, that North Carolina voters were, for the first time, voting under one of the harshest new election laws in the country. In fact, the worst voter suppression law in the country, and the worst since Jim Crow. And it was a law that Tillis helped to craft. Among other changes, the law slashed 7 early days or voting days, eliminated same-day registration, and prohibited voting outside of voters' home precinct. All forms of voting, especially popular among African Americans, among the disabled, and among the poor, and among the working class of our state.
Yes.
Now, and young people as well, many young people who were battling to vote. We had to fight for precincts to be put back on college campus, for instance, at Appalachian State and other places. While it is too early to assess the impact, what we know is that the election protection hotline were hot on election day. Reports were coming in from everywhere of widespread problems. And look at some of the numbers from recent elections suggest, according to this report, that the magnitude of the problem may not be far from the margin of victory. In the last midterms in 2010, 200,000 voters cast ballots during the early voting days, now cut, according to this recent court decision. In 2012, 700,000 voted during those days, including more than a quarter of all African Americans who voted that year. In 2012, 100,000 North Carolinians, almost 1/3 of whom were African Americans, voted using same-day registration, which was not available this year. And 7,500 voters cast their ballots outside of their home precincts that year. And though they may not have counted for district races that were assigned to a separate district, they would have been counted for those at-large races. And we don't know how many people were turned away who thought they could register and vote on the same day. We don't know how many people were sent to the wrong precincts at the last minute. We have reports in places of many. In fact, I personally was at the precinct on 21, I believe, Lick Lane, in Durham, North Carolina, where you had in one place 2 precincts. One was more rural and affluent, no problems at all. But the one that catered to the more urban and the more diverse crowd, the people were in line over 2.5 hours after closing. People had been turned away from the polls. Some were turned away at 7:29, sent to another precinct, and unlike in previous years, where they could have at least voted for the at-large race or the statewide race, they had to rush with only 1 or 2 minutes to try to get it. We don't know if those persons even made it. We know that several people got tickets that night because they had to park in the dark all along the side of the road. And we have reports from this in many other places, Granville County and others. But in spite of this, Tuesday saw a major moral victory. This massive turnout in the face of every voter suppression trick they could throw at is a tribute to the hundreds of thousands of people who ordinarily would pass up the off-election year vote. Now we add this to a growing list of moral victories out of the state of North Carolina and in struggles all across the nation. In message after message after Election Day, our allies said to us through texts, through email, through Facebook, that they are emboldened to continue our moral fight. It should be noted that this participation, despite intimidation, despite voter suppression efforts, and lewd amounts of extremist-focused money, shows that when the people are united, inseparable in our struggle for putting people first, putting people over greed and corporate interests, and when activism is guided by a common agenda, not any one person or any one party. The people can defeat the callous cynicism of the divide and conquer strategies, regardless of the powers stacked against us. And that is a message that should come out of this election, one of the great moral and political values. Now, let us remind our friends and those who would try to push us backward, the forward together moral movement does not live and die by election. Let's be clear about that. We are not Democrat, we're not Republican. We have been clear about who we are. Now, it is unfortunate that we as a state have promoted an employee who has repeatedly failed his constituencies by undermining public education, health care, labor rights, women's rights, LGBT rights, immigrants' rights, voting rights, and environmental justice. In fact, has failed to keep his promises he made when he swore to uphold the Constitution. But our movement does not hinge, does not get discouraged, does not get depressed, does not fall back, and does not retreat based on one election, one candidate, or one party. We will continue the struggle in the courts, in the streets, in the legislature, and we will build new friends and new alliances. We will continue to teach and build new coalitions of the excluded and the oppressed, and we will connect them with people from all different races, creeds, and parties, because we have Republicans and Democrats who are part of this movement. We will work together because there is much needless suffering that can be addressed if we maintain and stay strong in an independent moral movement that holds all political forces accountable. We always knew that regardless of the result in this United States Senate race, Pat McCrory would still be the governor of North Carolina. We knew that, and would still have power along with the North Carolina legislature to provide access to health care and quality education and power to lift working people if they were to govern for the good of the whole. So we always knew the election season would come and go, but our season of a moral movement would not go anywhere.
There you go. That's right.
We must continue to fight for the principle of the good of the whole. That is not a liberal principle. That is not a conservative principle. That is a constitutional principle rooted in our deepest constitutional and spiritual values. Additionally, we still have to win our battle to protect voting rights.
That's right. That's right.
And we are going to win that. And our lawyers are going to fight hard.
That's right.
We have to win our battle against redistricting in the courts. All of these things were stacked against this election.
That's right.
So our moral mandate is as clear as it's ever been. Now, a couple of analysis. This narrow victory, and we call it that, by Speaker Tillis, is not a validation of what he and the legislature and the governor and the extremists have done. Actually, it's a kind of repudiation. Think with me for a minute. When you have the power of state government, both houses of the General Assembly and the governor's office, and all of the members of the leaders of the board of election around the state, when you engage in voter suppression, when you have deep money pockets, and with all of that, you can only eke out a narrow victory in a statewide election. That is not a validation. And furthermore, you win a narrow victory and the electorate that elects you has almost no ideological and racial diversity. Did you look around the room of the victory party and see? Where were the African Americans? Where was the LGBT community? You know, where were the Latinos? When you win like this, you can't get to 50%. You can't get above 49,000 voters. With all of these advantages, this is a sign of a growing repudiation. That's right. Speaker Tillis should not see his victory as a mandate, but as a message that he should govern as a senator for all the people and not be a tool of the extremists. Because what may seem to be victories now may turn into real losses in 2016 and beyond.
That's right.
Because the South is changing. The demographics are changing. This movement is not going anywhere, and the consciousness of people are waking up. Before this began, Already, 58% of North Carolinians were saying we should expand Medicaid. 58% of North Carolinians saying we should have never cut unemployment insurance, and on and on. Now, while we hope that Senator-elect Tillis will keep his word and govern as a modern, Reverend Laws, it seemed to us on election night, watching his victory speech, that he would carry over his legacy of denying unemployment benefits. That's what he said. He said, I'm going to continue the tradition. Well, the tradition he set is denying unemployment benefits, cutting education spending, denying Medicaid expansion, even when there have been other Republicans like John Kasich who have said that to deny Medicaid expansion is really an attack and a war on the poor. The tradition he set is one of suppressing the voting rights, passing the worst voter suppression bill, HB 5589, after Shelby, among other attacks on the good people of this state. We hope that that is not the tradition he's talking about carrying into the United States Senate. We pray that this will not be the case, and he could begin to signal a new direction by seriously considering Medicaid expansion before he becomes sworn in as Senator, for 500,000 North Carolinians and the 2,800 to, some reports say 2,800, some say 1,500, but the thousands of people, hundreds, that could lose their lives. This would prove that his statement last week was not a cynical ploy to win last-minute votes. He could back off his call for repeal of the Affordable Care Act. He could do that. He could say, I'm not going to follow the line of the extremists. I don't want to see children with pre-existing conditions denied access to health care. I don't want to see women who need cervical exams and insurance for maternity, paternity, and breast exams to be denied. I'm not going to be a senator and go to Washington, D.C. and take health care from the over 300,000 North Carolinians, black, white, Republicans, and Democrats, who signed up for the Affordable Care Act.
While he gets the best care.
Yeah. While he, becoming a senator, will have not only the best care in the United States, but the best care in the world for free because he got elected by the people. Yes. He could say that I'm not going to deny 23,000 veterans in North Carolina access to Medicaid expansion anymore. He could say that I want children to be able to stay on their parents' insurance until they're 26 years old. He could say that since North Carolina had the fourth highest number of people to accept the Affordable Care Act, that I'm not going to make my first days in office as a senator I'm not going to use those first days in the work of repealing what has benefited and revived the health care hopes of so many North Carolinians. And if he really wants to be a senator for all the people, he could do like the founder of his party, Abraham Lincoln, and he could support voting rights.
Yes, got to do that.
And he could be a senator and say, I'm a Southern senator, and I'm coming here to support the restoration of the provision of Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act to ensure that Section 5 pre-clearance coverage is revived for North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, and Mississippi. Yes. So today, we're going to begin by forwarding him a letter to him and Governor McCrory, asking them to meet with a representative group from our ranks of blacks, whites, Republicans, Democrats, people who are sick, who've been denied Medicaid expansion, people who benefited from the Affordable Care Act, to meet with us, to join in calling for an emergency session once again, right in the middle of this Thanksgiving season and this Christmas season, to test whether or not Senator-elect Tillis and the governor are serious about governing for all the people.
Amen.
The governor even said, I think yesterday, that they should not be haughty with this election, that they should not be spiking the football. I think that was the language he used. But it's not just words, Mr. Tillis. It's not just words, Mr. McCrory. It's deeds and action. And we also ask him to meet with us because, Tom, you have to, we know that Mr. Tillis has met with the Tea Party. There's a report, and we're going to hand it to all of the members. We know the Tea Party in North Carolina, a threat to, this report was sent out before the election that shows in detail how entrenched the Tea Party is in the legislature and his own relationship. We're going to give it to the media. We're not saying he shouldn't meet with the Tea Party, but how are you going to meet with the Tea Party and won't meet with us?
That's right. That's right. That's wrong.
How you meet with them when in fact we are more diverse? We represent the full breadth of North Carolina.
That's right.
That's right.
Exactly.
In all of its beauty.
That's right.
In all of its beauty. So we're saying today after the election is over, everybody's giving their cute acceptance speeches, but now we have to move from words to works.
That's right.
Yep.
And we want to test now
That's right.
whether there will be work. There's still much work to be done, and we're not going to bow out of any fight that would take us backwards.
That's right.
The Bible says in Zechariah 9:12, return to your fortresses, you prisoners of hope. We are not prisoners in hope of getting out of prison. We are prisoners of hope.
That's right.
We have no other option but to believe in the kind of hope that this America, North Carolina, can always be what we claim to be on paper.
That's right.
And as Hebrews says, we do not belong to those who shrink back and destroy, but those who have faith and are saved. Now this last piece I want, and I'll take all questions, because we've been writing something about giving some advice to these parties since we're nonpartisan. If history was filled with successive and continual victories, complacence would abound. Rather than a merry-go-round, history is fraught with both successes and defeat. The outcome of these elections were less than desirable for some, but there are some important takeaways for Democrats and Republicans. The message to Democrats, we believe, is continue building the base and expanding the electorate in races large and small, from Senate seats to governor's mansions to statewide offices. The message to Democrats is also that many Democrats distance themselves from the positive policies of President Obama.
That's it.
This gives perception of running scared rather than running for something.
Don't be cowards.
Let me explain. For instance, if over 300,000 North Carolinians of all different races, creeds, parties, and affiliations accepted the Affordable Care Act and the opportunities therein, and if North Carolina was the fourth highest state, why run from that? Instead of making your opponent answer why they don't want people with pre-existing conditions to have health insurance.
All
right.
That's right. Exactly.
Why run from it? Why distance yourself from the good things that have been done by the leader of your party? Why try to play the Washington two-step, which leaves you dancing to the rhythms of partisanism rather than dancing to the soul music of our deepest constitutional and moral values, our core values of our democracies? Why do that? When you do that, you reinforce in the minds of voters that you are incapable of addressing the issues confronting the nation, because you will not even stand up for the very things you fought for. Democrats must, when they have a story about value decisions, stand on those values.
Stand there.
And tell it.
That's right.
And hold ultra-conservative extremist politicians accountable for their attacks on women, workers, the sick, poor, and people of color.
That's right.
When you run for cover, it effectively allows extremists to run away from their disastrous record. You can't allow your values and messages to be dictated by the whims of public opinion polls. If Americans love anything, it's consistency and confidence of conviction. And you never see the Republicans running from their constituencies, like the Tea Party and others.
That's right.
If Democrats second-guess their accomplishments, second-guess their own commander-in-chief, how much more will the American public do so?
Yes.
Who wants to be affiliated with a leader whose own team has abandoned? For the Democratic Party, this is a moment for base building and reflection.
Yes, indeed.
But on the other hand, since we're nonpartisan, Republicans should view the victory not as a mandate to enact more extreme policies, but as an opportunity to engage all voters, not just those who share the same belief. They must engage us in historic and unprecedented way. Otherwise, if they take the path of extremism, they will find themselves on the dust heap where extremists, particularly in the South, have wound up on the wrong side of history.
Yes.
Because history is against attacks on women.
That's right.
History is against attacks on the poor. History is against attacks on voting rights.
Absolutely.
If they are going to truly govern and not face tremendous social challenges and protests, they must move away from Tea Party extremism and govern for the good of the whole.
Amen.
Stop attacking voting rights and the vulnerable, and build our democracy, embrace diversity, ensure voting rights. In fact, Republicans would do well to learn a lesson from one of their own, Teddy Roosevelt, who around about this same time, 1912, 1913, 1914, 100 years ago, embraced health care. Please, Republicans, remember that when you attack President Obama for the Affordable Care Act, you're attacking your own leader, Teddy Roosevelt.
That's right.
Teddy Roosevelt embraced public education, and so did Eisenhower. Teddy Roosevelt embraced protection of the environment and standing up against big corporations. And he embraced raising the minimum wage and fundamental labor rights, not as Republican ideas or Democrat ideas, but as the moral foundations of a great democracy. He did that in the opening of the 20th century. And what he did in the opening of the 20th century would be a great lesson, a great place for Republicans today to follow in the 21st century. Now, fortunately, this is not the last election. While elections have consequences, it's up to the people in the states and across this country to hold these elected leaders accountable. Your work is not over. The people don't go away after the election.
That's right.
Politicians don't get the right to just do whatever they want to just because they got elected. Because even if you're elected, it does not give you the authority to run roughshod over our Constitution and the deepest moral values. And we will always plant our feet in those constitutional values and plant our feet in those deep spiritual and religious values. And we will never retreat on those. That is our role. We have shown what is possible to do in North Carolina. We have only just begun. We have no intentions of letting up. We will continue to organize. In fact, let me go ahead and say we've already announced our mass moral HKOJ People's Assembly March and Rally February 14th on Valentine's Day. We will march, we will organize, we will gather for love and justice in the state's capital. We're already planning our winter meeting the end of February to bring in all of our branches from across the state and be clear about the political terrain we're in, the values we stand for, and the things from which we will never retreat. We're already planning a strategy session for our more than 160 coalition partners. In fact, we had planned it before the election ever happened because whoever got elected, we knew we would have to hold them accountable. And yes, you might as well open the doors because we'll be back at the legislature when they open again tomorrow, Monday, all over again, and our rallies around this state educating and registered voters. We are not going anywhere because we still will fight for a state where the weak grow strong
That's right.
and the strong grow great. Thank you so very much. Members of the media, I'll accept any questions that you have. Yes, Laura.
At the Tillis, I should say, Senator-elect Tillis' celebration on Tuesday night, Governor Corey pointed to those high turnout numbers as proof that the laws that were passed to change the voters' laws were not suppressing turnout.
Yeah, it's an interesting analogy. It's kind of like somebody who asks you to play pool. They tilt the table at the back end. You make the shot, and then they say, "See, you made it." The fact is, pool shouldn't be played with the table tilted at the
That's
back.
right.
People came out and overcame, just like my father overcame segregation of public schools. but it didn't make segregation was right. We don't know all of the suppression.
Absolutely.
People were turned away.
That's right.
That's suppression. People went to the wrong place. We know that. People were denied early voting. That is what the court said in the Fourth Circuit. They said to enact laws that you know are targeted at a specific community and can have a disparate impact on them is a form of voter suppression. The other thing the justice says, it does not matter if 2,000 more people came out. Our Constitution is written in such a way that if one person's constitutional rights are abridged or denied, then that's a constitutional violation.
That's right.
So again, Governor McCrory, you know, just like they made the fraudulent claims about fraud, are trying to spin the tenacity of people to come out as some kind of justification for making coming out hard.
Exactly.
The tenacity of the people does not take away from the voter suppression tactics that we know were used and were implemented.
That's right.
And that is why our battle in the courts will go forward and not backwards. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
You've talked today and obviously for a long time about Senator-elect Tillis and his voting record in the House of Representatives. And I guess I want to get into your concerns about him being elected, but not necessarily focusing on him. More so, what's your reaction to the fact that the majority of people who did vote in this election didn't agree with what you were talking about and did vote for him?
That's not necessarily. The majority of the people who voted in this election, in an election with, we said, all of the things stacked against him, in an election where you had all of these challenges, and what we have said all along is that that's a strange analysis. Let me put it like this. Yeah, let me put it like this. There was a day when people would have voted in the majority for segregation, but it didn't mean it was right. So just because somebody can use their machinery, political machinery, and voter suppression tactics, and all of those things, and secure a minute, small victory electorally, does not mean that the majority of the people who have elected to agree with their extremist policies. Even they are saying that. Even the governor said that about this election. He said, we can't be spiking, so it's not just me. They're even saying it. They know that this was a very minute election. They know that this was a margin. They know that if there was a great, massive mandate for them, the electorate would have been much broader. But even if you're elected, it does not mean you get to violate the fundamental values of our Constitution. It does not mean that you've gotten a mandate to hurt the poor, to hurt public education, to hurt women, to roll back voting rights. That's why we have courts. That's why the Constitution guarantees us the right to present our grievances and freedom of speech and protest. Because elections happen, but after the elections, people still have to govern. And that's where we challenge. We will fight in the election, but we will also fight after the election to push elected people to do what is right based on what they swear to do. One more point. By your analogies, not your analogies, but I know people say, we would have never had a civil rights movement. Because people have said, well, the folk that agreed with Jim Crow got elected.
Right.
The people that agreed with segregation, they were elected. The people that don't want to vote right, no, what did the movement do? Despite who was elected, the movement changed the context and the contour and the consciousness of the society to create a different kind of dynamic. We did it even with Democrats. President Johnson did not plan to sign the Voting Rights Act. He was a segregationist in Texas. But the movement said, regardless of how you got elected and what you plan to do, we're going to continue the protest, continue to shape the conscience, and shift your plans. So that in 1963, you had the March on Washington, right? In 1964, you had an election. A lot of people didn't get changed in that election in '64 that had regressive mindset. But after the march across the Edmonds Pettus Bridge and after the protest, people who were elected to do one thing ended up doing another because they could not stand under the deep, conscientious movement that the people built together.
Moral lesson.
That's right.
And that's the power of a moral movement. It is not dictated by anyone. We participate in the election. We register people to vote. We call them to get out. We put out a nonpartisan voter guide to tell people. But our work doesn't hinge on an election. It doesn't stop before an election. It doesn't stop on an election. And it doesn't stop after election. We have elected to build a movement of moral consciousness rooted in our deepest moral values to hold all people accountable. And all of you in the media know we didn't just start when the Republicans took over office.
No, no.
We've been at this 8 years. We challenged Democrats. We fought Democrats to get same-day registration early vote. We fought them 15 years. You know we're going to fight Republicans and extremists when it comes to them trying to take it. So that's our point. We don't get discouraged because of an election. Never will, never have. Yes, ma'am.
What do you make of the fact that you and your movement were used to attack some Democrats?
The weakness of the ability of the extremists to make their own point. You know, anytime you use somebody that's not even running, whether it's the President Obama or myself, first of all, it's an attempt to distort. No, and it's a form of race baiting because no, they never put a picture of the crowd. They try to make it about me. I'm not 80,000, 100,000 people. I'm not 160 organizations. I'm not 100 branches of the NAACP. I'm a servant, pure and simple. That's all I am. But they couldn't put the picture of the diversity. They couldn't show the Republican teacher that stood on the Moral Monday stage from the West and said that what was going on in cutting in public education was just wrong. They couldn't put the white labor person that was Republican and the black one that was Democrat standing on the stage denouncing the attack on unemployment and earned income tax credit. So what do? You try to create some boogeyman. And it's the same tactic they did with the Racial Justice Act. You remember they put the flyers out with somebody breaking in your house and killing you when they knew that in fact wasn't happening. It reveals a weak core. You know, if they wanted to debate me, we offered to debate. We said all during tomorrow Monday, Mr. Tillis, Governor, you want to debate us on tomorrow? Not on personal, you know, because all y'all have our personal flaws, but you want to debate us on it? Come on. You won't take that. But what you try to do is sow this kind of race baiting and image baiting and fear baiting. And it really reveals a weakness of your positions because not one of them put an ad out and said, elect me and I'll take your unemployment. Elect me and I'll fire your teachers. Elect me and I'll deny Medicaid. Elect me and I'll allow children to not have insurance just if they have a pre-existing. They cannot run on their agenda. So they must create distractions. And ultimately the weakness of this vote, the fact that you had in Wake County, you had a full turnover of the county commission, even though they tried to use us. A few years ago they tried to use us, and what happened? The whole Board of Education turned over. The fact that they tried that out west and 2 members of the Republican Party lost in the House. The fact that the only place you had turnover was here in the state of North Carolina, of any state in the country. With all of these attacks, with all of these distortion, the best you can do is 49%. You can't get to 50%, and the best you can do is a little under 50,000. That exposes your weakness, and all we've got to do is continue building, because the people are not going to fall for that. But again, if I was running an extremist and more exclusive politics, I wouldn't show all the pictures of the people at Moral Monday either. Right. You know, I mean, it would really work to your disadvantage, because when you look at Moral Monday and our movement, you see North Carolina and America in all of its beauty. When you look at the policies and pictures of the extremists and their campaigns, what you see is an homogeneous form of exclusion that is not representative of the full breadth of our democracy.
What? Sorry.
No, it's fine.
What? Okay, 2 years.
She get me this morning. Y'all put, you know that little thing I put in my ear so y'all give me the answers? Put it right there. You know, I got one of those, like George Bush. I got one. You can't see it. Oh, you got one? No, I'm teasing. Go ahead.
2 years of marches and demonstrations, and you know, we were all
8
there.
years.
And 8 years, okay, but especially the Moral Monday
Sure.
at the legislature, the arrests, everything.
Sure.
What have you accomplished with them?
Oh, what have we accomplished? First of all, let's start with the consistency. Never in the history of this country have you had a movement of this last over 82 weeks. Never in the history of the country in the South have you seen this kind of diversity, even with the Selma to Montgomery movement. Here's somebody who was there. Never in the history of the country that you have seen 1,006 people get arrested.
Yeah.
When we started, the governor was at 50% in the polls. Now it's under 30% falling. The General Assembly was at 40. One poll said they're around 19%. We've seen a shifting in the consciousness. When we started, most people didn't understand Medicaid expansion, unemployment, but look at the recent PPP polls that came out, 58%. 61% of North Carolinians saying that they would accept a tax raise if they know that it was going to education and teachers.
Breakthrough in the West.
Yeah, we've seen the massive breakthrough in the West. We've got 7 new branches in the West that are predominantly white, where we've never had action before, and that Moral Monday movement that is out there in a massive way. We've shown, right, we've seen this movement expand to other places. We've seen wins in the court system, whether it's the win saying that we should have never been arrested, or the win in the courts about taking public money and giving it to private schools. We won in the Fourth Circuit when it came to voter suppression laws, which sets up a powerful scenario for next year. And we built a movement with staying power, a movement that's not going anywhere. We just in this election, people all over the country are saying there's no way the electorate would have been as deep and as broad this midterm. Everybody was saying it was going to be low, normal. What happened? We broke through. Why? Because there's an intense independent movement of diversity right here on the ground. And then the last thing, Laura, is moral movements take a long view. You don't take a short view. It took 2 years. You say marching. It took 2 years from the March on Washington to the Voting Rights Act. And death. We haven't experienced any of that, and hopefully we won't. It took from Rosa Parks sitting down. It took from 55 all the way until 1964 to get a Civil Rights Act. It took the NAACP from 1909 all the way to 1954 to win. So we don't have this, this short-term limited view that often people get caught up in news cycles, because you have to change as the story changes each day, and that's your job. We have to stay consistent. We have to be there when the cameras are not there and when they are there. We have to fight when politicians are with us and when they're not. We have to fight when politicians say they're for us but they want to give less than what we really want. We have to fight when there are politicians that don't want to give us anything to get what's needed. So our battle of a moral movement is long. There's a scripture that says the battle is not given to the swiftest, nor to the strongest, but to those who endure it and to the end. We brought, people often talk about where are the young people. In our movement, thousands of young people have gone. We had 42 moral marches to the polls since the end of the legislative session. Many media here wouldn't have known about that. But think about where we started. What have we done? We started the last 2 weeks in Watauga, in Yancey, and when somebody called me and said the NAACP and the moral movement is in Yanceyville, it's 99% white, 89% Republican. Well, we got a branch there. The Republican chair resigned up there last year and was a part of our movement because he said, I'm not with this Tea Party extremism. We are organizing there. But we are also organizing in Edgecombe County, where it's predominantly black. That in itself is an accomplishment in the South because it is pointing us to a methodology that moves us toward this third Reconstruction. And we believe we're in the embryonic stages of a third Reconstruction that will be rooted in this kind of fusion politics. Remember, if you build this kind of movement, North Carolina's electorate is 25% African American, you add 3% Latino, that's 28%. That means you get 22.5% of whites to vote their future, not their fears. The old Southern strategies that divide us don't work anymore. We're in this for the long haul because we see the walls breaking down. We see the old South changing, and we know that the folk that are trying to fight against it see it too. If they didn't see it, they wouldn't fight us so hard. If they didn't see us, they wouldn't try to stop our movement, and they wouldn't call us names, and they would ignore us. They wouldn't push so hard to suppress the vote.
There you go.
You only fight this hard. Somebody said it like this the other day, Lon, I'll stop. They said, if people have to change the Supreme Court, get the Supreme Court to go backwards on rights that have been proven that's necessary in America, stack the deck in redistricting, do everything they can with voter suppression, and call you out of your name and refuse to meet you, you should take that as a sign of your strength, not your weakness.
That's right.
And so our movement is strong and growing. We're going to release this letter this afternoon. We're not going to release it right now. The actual letter calling on the speaker and the governor to meet with us, and we're going to put together a representative group of Republicans in our ranks, Democrats, clergy, people who have been affected, doctors, and we ask you in the media, ask them why. But now we don't want to meet to have tea and cookies. We'll do that, but we want a substantive decision about how are we going to expand Medicaid. You ought to ask Speaker Tillis. You just said you want to govern for all the people. When you go to the Senate, are you going to be against voting rights, or are you going to say I'm a Southern senator and I want to see Section 4 restored so that states like North Carolina and others are covered under the Voting Rights Act? Or is he going to follow what Senator Apodaca said the day after Shelby, now that the headache has been removed? Which Tillis will we see?
Right.
That's the question. Which Tillis will we see? Is he going to say, as of today, I will no longer attack the Affordable Care Act and call for the repeal, because to repeal it will be to repeal over 300,000 North Carolinians' access. To repeal it will be to cause children in North Carolina to have pre-existing conditions not to be covered by the insurance company. Those are the kind of questions we believe we are asked to meet, and not to ask. Those are not partisan questions. They're not Democrat. Those are policy questions that we believe need to be addressed, especially when you start using this language about, I'm the senator for all the people, I'm going to work with all the people. What does that mean? Because if your policies are exclusive, then your words are elusive. Any others? Thank you all so much. God bless you for coming always. And look, we'll see you on, if not before, February the 14th. St. Valentine's Day. Love and Justice March and People's Assembly like you've never seen.